Hey guys, hey big buddies, it's Jessie. Welcome back to my channel, and today is a very exciting day because why am I holding the Divergent book, you might be asking? Well, it's because Veronica Roth is coming out with a new book called Poster Girl, and I'm going to the live book signing of it where she's going to be talking about Poster Girl, and I'm taking you guys with me, so let's go.
So did Isabel started with you?
Oh my gosh.
Hello, hello. Does that work? Yes, it does.
Does it? Yes. We probably don't need it, to be honest, but that's okay.
We could try without if people raise you. Welcome you to the book stall and welcome Veronica Roth back to the book stall. I think if we weren't her very first place to have an event as an author, we were among the very first.
My Divergent Launch event was here.
Yes. Yeah.
So I did a pre-pub event at Anderson's, but that was for a bunch of like middle school kiddos.
Right.
So it wasn't public. Yeah.
At that point, it was just launching, so it wasn't Divergent, the series, or Divergent, the movies. It was a very highly anticipated book, but not when it became known.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, whoa. I don't want to think about it.
so it's so great to have Veronica back in the store. You know Veronica. That's why you're here. She is the New York Times bestselling author of The Chosen Ones, the short story collection The End and Other Beginnings, the Divergent series, and the Carve the Mark duology. She's also the guest editor of the most recent Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy Anthology. And if I can get to it, I have a question. They're holding it in their hands. They came out of the box today.
Oh.
So can you tell us just a little bit about what to expect?
Yeah, sure. So, like my last adult book, which, guys, we gotta come up with a better term. Adult book is like, not that racy. Anyway, like my other adult book, Chosen Ones, this story is kind of in the aftermath of the story we usually hear. So after the fall of a dystopian regime is where it takes place. But it's about a woman who was on propaganda posters for the former regime when she was a teenager, and now she's been locked away along with a bunch of other political prisoners in like a section of the Seattle megalopolis. And she sort of has a life there that she's cobbled together for herself, but then an old enemy comes to her with a deal. And he says, if you find this missing girl who's taken from her family by the old regime 10 years ago, then you can have your freedom. Which feels like a completely impossible task. But obviously, there would be no book if it were truly impossible. So but the investigation leads her into her family's dark secrets and her own personal secrets. So it gets very thrillery by the end there. So yeah, that is Poster Girl.
Okay, and I also have to ask, because a lot of you maybe are just seeing this for the first time, the cover with the poster girl. But the thing we all thought, right when we saw that, is, Veronica, is that you?
No, I mean, I can't speak to the artist, whatever she did, but it's not supposed to be me. Although now I'm thinking I should do that eyeliner and take a selfie. Yeah. It does look like me, doesn't it, I guess? At first I was like, no, it doesn't. No, yeah, I guess it
But and that's something a lot of people don't know, is like you didn't get to, they present you with some cover, you probably have enough power to look at like cover ideas and options, right? But do you have right of refusal, or how does that work for you?
I do, because I got very fancy.
Not everybody does.
Yes.
Sometimes you just take what you get.
Right, but it's funny, if you look at enough book covers, you kind of see how artists will take, they take like a reference image and it'll be like a celebrity. And you can kind of tell who it is. So the first reference image we got for her was so distinctly Kirsten Dunst. we can't do that. Just like with the teeth and everything. I was like, so I don't know. I think that she tried to go more generic looking, and I guess it makes her look more like me. In a good way.
It's a great cover.
Well, thanks.
So for this novel, did it start from, it's working with a post-dystopian place where the regime has fallen. Did this come from an idea you had about a character, or an idea you had about the times we live in, or?
Well, I think sort of the grain of the idea was wanting to figure out what other stories we haven't heard the aftermath of a little bit, and dystopia comes to mind because that's where I started with dystopian uprising, kind of. But what made the book actually come together is thinking about which character would tell that story most interestingly, and for me, that meant not the hero of the dystopian uprising, but the person on the other side of it, on the wrong side of it, I guess we would say. And that was interesting because it's just a different character arc than I've ever done before. It's like someone coming to terms with what they've done, what they believed, and kind of unraveling all these little knots that their life is in. So once I figured out that was the story I wanted to tell, the rest of it came easily. But I don't think, it was the reverse of how I usually work, because I'm usually more of build a world and then figure out who lives in it. But this one was like, I know who lives in it, now I have to build a world around her.
And the last book, The Chosen Ones, was also in some ways this, what I was thinking is the story after the story, because The Chosen Ones is, raise your hand if you've read it.
Oh, guys!
Yes. So, as you know, that's the story of a group of young people after they defeated the ultimate evil, and what happens to all that trauma and shock. It's sort of like if you had a story about Frodo for the years after he was all done with the ring or something like that. And this story too is a story of what happens after the fall of the regime. So it's a story after a story. Is there something you think that connects those, or something that attracts to you about writing beyond the end?
I think it probably relates to having written YA for so long. Not so long. I mean, it wasn't that long, but it was a third of my life, so I guess I can say that. I think the way you think when you write YA is like, when you're a teenager, everything that you experience feels like the biggest thing ever, because for you, it is. Like, it's probably up to that point, like the most exciting thing that ever happened to you. So it's totally reasonable to feel that way about the experiences you're having. But then I think sometimes when people graduate high school or graduate college, they kind of feel this like, ooh, extreme bummer, because like the thing that you were working for all that time is over. And that can be very scary. It's unsettling to kind of stare into that particular void. But there are plenty of stories after that point. And I think that's what makes me interested in it, almost like soothing myself, because I had, this big life experience with the Divergent series, and then it's like, okay, but it's okay that it's over because there's still more to come. So I wonder if this is my way of coping, is writing these like aftermath stories. Like, it's fine, you can still be the hero of your own story. Yeah.
For your main character, so you said she was the one that got you into the story more than the world building. What about her maybe is a reflection of you, and what about her is very different from you?
I don't think she's really like me that much. First of all, everyone always observes about her, to her, that she has a really flat affect. She's like a piece of paper. People kind of project what they think on her. I don't think anyone's ever accused me of having a flat affect. So many gestures. And also, I think the things about her that are in common with me are the things that everyone has in common with her. Not everyone, but a lot of people have in common with her, which is that you have things to unlearn. You have ways that you've participated in the world that you're not proud of. You have, all that stuff. You maybe made mistakes when you were a teenager, or you've changed a lot since you were a teenager. Like, those are almost universal feelings. So in that sense, yes, she's similar to me, but probably like every character I write, she's painfully straightforward because that's how I am. So probably that's also it. But someday I'll write a tricksy, conniving character, but today is not that day.
You noted that while you were working on this book, you took a hiatus from social media, and I think I even remember seeing the announcement that you were sort of saying goodbye.
Oh, do you follow me on Instagram?
for the cute dog pictures.
Yeah, well, she is very cute.
She's a very, very adorable dog. And as someone who also has taken steps away from social media, that interests me, and because you're a writer and in that sense a public figure. So how were those two things tied in together, writing the book and taking a step away from social media?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I kind of needed one because after Chosen Ones, like I had to promote entirely online, which was, I mean, it's great. We had the internet for that, but also it was exhausting. So, and then I had to, once that was over, I had to deal with my life again. But I got overstimulated and stressed, and also then the election was coming up, and I was like, I have to leave. I can't do this anymore. I haven't slept in 3 weeks, and I have to leave. Anyway, but I also think there's an element of it that's like it was for the book, almost like method writing, because in Poster Girl, the kind of dystopianness of the society that she's just kind of escaped from, or that has fallen or collapsed, is that there are surveillance devices implanted in everybody's eyeball, because it wouldn't be a Veronica Roth novel without some eye horror. But anyway, so the insights, or that's what they're called, are injected when you're young, and then they kind of grow into your brain, and they monitor everything you do, but they also perform the same functions as like a smartphone. You can look things up on them, you can watch movies, like you can talk to your friends, all the things we carry around in our pockets, you just carry around in your head. And for Sonia, that created a feeling of like warmth and connectedness, like the internet can sometimes do. And then she's suddenly cut off from it when the regime falls. So I kind of wanted to experience that like to a much lesser degree and kind of see what it felt like, and did some research at that time about psychological effects of mass surveillance and of social media. But social media is the surveillance that we've all volunteered for. So the more we talk about this, the more I'll seem like I'm paranoid. I'm maybe a little paranoid now.
Well, it is. It's anything we're doing on social media is being, people, it can be really creepy. I think probably everyone's had this experience of talking about something in a car while your phone is on, and suddenly the next ad, the next time you look at your phone, oh, I was just talking about going to a winery in California, and here's an ad for one. That's funny. What a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. Very unsettling. Although I've tried to plant stuff like that for a while. Me and my husband were sometimes talking about pro wrestling, not just for the phone, to see if we'd get ads for it, but we didn't. It didn't work. We probably didn't talk about it enough, or maybe it knew.
It knew.
Yeah, you can tell.
So, Poster Girl is releasing. It's slightly in the future, but this is a time when all this mass data surveillance is on the rise, and we've all opted in, or many of us have opted in to just having our data mined. What are your thoughts on the future of that kind of surveillance? I mean, in the U.S., a lot of people talk about breaking up the big monopolies. A lot of people talk about ways, that maybe the social media has to be held accountable, where you can sign in or opt in or out of the various kinds of surveillance they do. But then there's all the people that, like my sister-in-law, that totally believes that getting a vaccine means that the government is listening into you with the device they have.
They don't need it. They have your phone. It's completely unnecessary. What are my thoughts?
Do you think? Well, how close could we be to the world that you depict here? And are there things we can do to prevent that world from happening, or
Gosh,
is it too late?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, the first obstacle is getting people to care about your data being available to the highest bidder, basically. Which I think I do think some people have become a little more aware of this with the Supreme Court stuff that's been going on and their period tracking apps and stuff like that. Suddenly it's like, oh, you know, governments do change, actually, and it can happen faster than you think. So that is always my like main point is like, you should care about this. You don't have to like be paranoid. I certainly haven't given up my smartphone. Like, I'm not on social media, but I think that leads me to my second point, which is that we always put this on the user. Like, you have to opt out. You have to get people to stop stealing your data. I actually think it needs to be on like a bigger scale than that. Like, we need to advocate for transparency, and also like put measures in place where you can get out. But that has to come from like the company, and the pressure to do that has to come from us, I guess. So I don't know what the solution is. I think about this a lot. I know we can't expect everybody to like suddenly go off the grid Ron Swanson style, like that's not gonna work. But certainly, like, I don't think it's your individual responsibility to fix this for yourself and your life and make things horrifically inconvenient for yourself and like disappear from public life. That's not a reasonable thing to suggest to people. But I would like to advocate for more transparency for sure as a first measure.
Well, and I think one's public life, or even one's private life, is becoming so much more enmeshed in social media. We talked before we came out here that, like, if you're not on Facebook, you're missing things like, I miss things like my high school friend's parents passing away, you know, something sad, and but it could be something joyful. It could be a little cousin's first steps. And back in the old days, not even that long ago, you either got a video sent to you, or a picture sent to you personally, but now it's just, if something like first steps are just up on Facebook, and if you're not on Facebook or Instagram for an older generation, you don't see those things.
Yeah, well, I guess the next time you have coffee with that person, just be like, tell me what happened in the last 6 months. We just, like, in general need to be, like, okay with this, I think, updating people on, like, your whole backlog of information.
Yeah. Let's see. I know one thing I want to say. I'm not sure we really pointed out, but when you came in tonight, you were listening to the playlist we gave you. We had someone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we got.
Oh, that's nice.
So I did have a question about that playlist. Is that songs you listened to or inspired you while you were writing, or is it things that reflect the book more than? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah. So when I come up with a book kind of little tiny idea, I start making a playlist. I am not particular about music. Like, whatever serves the playlist is what I listen to. So it just really like depends. But so I have like some on my Spotify now that you can't see. They're just for me, but they're like ideas that haven't taken shape yet at all. And eventually I'll be able to use the playlist to like be background music as I brainstorm. And then I also listen to it while I write. But at that point, I've listened to everything so many times that like I don't even hear it, which is how I can listen to songs with lyrics while writing. Because like a lot of people find that really difficult. And then so I keep adding stuff as I go. So some of the songs are like late stage editions, and some of them are early stage. But usually, if you pick a song, and you can do this when you get your book signed if you want. If you pick a song, I can tell you which part of the book I was writing while I was listening to that song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, usually. This one was particularly like strong. I mean, the playlist is very melancholy for this book. I was alone. It was the pandemic, and I'm writing a book about regimes falling and sad things. It's not all sad.
So you're listening to music as inspiration. Can you look back at other writers or film or TV shows that maybe had some influence on or inspiration for this book?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I feel like maybe tonal references, like the feeling of watching Children of Men is like what this book should be. That's probably a good one. Or like Gattaca, God, Gattaca's so good. Everyone should rewatch Gattaca.
I do want to go back.
Yeah, it's really good. Those are the only ones I can think of right now. I think I used to have like a list, but guys, I wrote this 2 years ago, so some of the details are escaping me.
A lot of my questions, actually, when I was looking over your questions, are the same as some of mine. So I'm going to go to yours pretty quickly because I was like, oh yeah, I was going to ask that. Oh yeah, I was going to ask that. So I have your stack of questions here. But I want to talk a little bit about it. And I just read this essay today, actually. In 2020, you wrote an essay for the New York Times about your experience taking anxiety medication and then tapering off it right before COVID-19. So, and I urge you all to look that up. It was a great essay. I really loved reading it. So, the tapering off and then COVID hits. What was that like? Because you wrote that just as that was happening. Where
Yeah. I had to edit it for COVID. So I had submitted it right before COVID was becoming widespread. And then the editor was like, I don't think you can, we would love to publish this essay, but like you have to rewrite parts of it because now we're in a different situation. And I was like, yep, sure. So basically reframed the entire essay because it had changed. I wasn't sure what the impact would be. I stayed off, I felt good actually. I felt like I still was anxious, but I felt like it was manageable for a long time, maybe like a year. And then it suddenly wasn't anymore, which I think a lot of people had kind of like delayed COVID reaction. You know, like for the first year we were all like, it's fine, everything's great. Like that dog with the coffee in the flaming room. Yeah. And then I had to go back on it. So I was like, this is no longer working. And then I went off of it again, and now I'm back on it again. But the tricky part about that is like when you write an essay in the New York Times about how you've gone off anxiety medication, you feel like you can't go back on it because it's like a failure, you know?
It's in the paper of note.
Yes, the paper of note. And I think letting myself just be okay with, like, there are seasons in your life, you know? It's okay to go through a hard one and to, like, take the help that you need at that time. And I tried to say that in the essay because I was trying to say it to myself, but I didn't know how much I needed to say that to myself. So anyway, that's my, going back on meds is not a failure, is my PSA for the evening.
Thank you. What was different about writing a novel like in that lockdown period versus before? You know, setting aside anxiety and just the sheer like what difference in living your life writing or as a writer, lockdown versus not?
That's a good question. I mean, for the first 6 months, like I couldn't focus on anything. I was watching the ends of all the sitcoms that I had never, because I don't finish TV shows that I like because I don't want them to be over. So I just like 6 episodes before the end stop. So I watched the end of Community finally. I watched the end of Parks and Rec finally, and the end of Schitt's Creek. Oh, finally. Yeah, I know. But then I like couldn't focus on reading and I couldn't focus on writing. So when I took the hiatus, that helped a lot. I was very creative in that time. That's why I have this book, and then in February I have a novella coming out. It's like, jeez. But I wrote them all during that time. So I think I was more productive. Not a lot about my day-to-day life changed during the pandemic. My husband and I already work really close together during the day, like literally back to back with a window between us. And so we were fine spending all that time together. For a profound introvert, it was kind of nice not having to see people all the time. I mean, at a certain point it became not so nice. Yeah, so not a lot changed, but like the feeling, like everything you looked at, everything you thought about was like touched with this weirdness. Like you go to the grocery store and there's, for some reason, no beans, because everyone decided to make chili. There's no flour, and there were arrows on the ground. Like, remember the arrows, guys? What a weird world we were living in suddenly. So it did affect me that way.
I was going to move on to what you're working on now, but I think so the rest of my questions I think you guys have already asked, so I'm going to ask your questions now, if that's okay.
Great. You need help?
And we said this on our sign, but obviously it was print that was too small. We said, write your name on the card so we know who asked the question. So I'll just ask you to raise your hand if this question is yours.
Or, yeah, if they want to be anonymous.
Oh yeah, if you want to be anonymous, that's okay too. There's nothing I don't think you have to be anonymous, but okay, either way. If this is your question and you want to identify yourself, raise your hand. If not, not.
Great.
Is there a writer you would like to meet?
All right. Is there a writer I'd like to meet? Ooh, guys, the more people you meet, the more you realize you don't want to meet people. trying to think if there's a writer who's like guaranteed to be good people. I don't know, but I will tell you a nice story, which is that one time I was at a publishing event and I was talking to this very, very kind man who I didn't know his name. And we talked for about 20 minutes. He was so, so nice. And then he, referred to himself as Garth. And yeah, I was like, "Are you Garth Nix?" And he was like, "Yes." I was like, "Ah!" Like, I can't believe I've been talking to you for 20 minutes and you're Garth Nix. Holy crap. Anyway, now we're friends. I've been to his house, I've met his children. He's really, really nice. And he always wears a three-piece suit at book events. Garth Nix, guys. You should read Sabriel if you haven't already. It's so good.
That was Garth.
Yeah, it's Garth calling.
I love this question. What is currently on your to-be-read pile?
Well, I'm right at the beginning of The Women Could Fly. Is that what it's called? Yeah, by Megan Giddings. So good so far, guys. And also I need to read Nona the Ninth, because I read Gideon the Ninth and Harrow, and now Nona. Have to read it. Those books are awesome. What else? Oh, George Saunders has a book coming out this week, which feels tremendously unfair for me to have a book coming out the same week as George Saunders, one of my heroes. So I'll be reading that too.
Here's a question of how do you become inspired to write a new story? Like, when do you? That's a question to think about.
Oh, okay, yeah. Probably shouldn't do. That's probably not good. COVID practice. Like that. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to answer because every story that I write is different. So sometimes I have a deadline and I have to come up with an idea. So I sit there, I have a Pinterest board of like everything I've ever seen, sci-fi wise, because I have at this point admitted to myself that that is where I need to start. Like by looking at sci-fi only. So I will look at that and be like, is there anything in here that I haven't done a version of, or like a take on, like, have I written about robots? Have I written about aliens? Have I written, I use that as like a starting point, or try and think about things I've liked recently to take whatever it is that I liked, like, what is it that I loved about Severance? P.S. Watch Severance. The book is, or that TV show is so good. But anyway, also the book is good. Both really good. So I try and kind of pull from there, but sometimes I have something cooking and it's been sitting there for like years, just like a paragraph about it or a little outline or something. Like there's a book that I haven't written. I wrote the full complete outline for it, beginning to end, very detailed. It's like a 20-page outline. I wrote it this like 3 or 4 years ago. It's still sitting there. I will get to it, but for some reason it's just not been the right time. So I've now gone on a tangent and I don't remember what the question was.
No, you did.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Hope that answers your question.
So if we move ahead from an idea of, how you get your idea or how you start an idea, let's move all the way forward. This question is, how do you know when you're done editing?
Ooh. What? Okay.
I wrote it because of her.
Okay. How do you know when you're done editing? Usually it's because I no longer have time and I have to turn in a draft. But do you mean like before you get published? How you know you're done editing?
Just never done it before.
Okay. So sorry. Sorry for this embarrassment. But it's hard to know. I mean, I know when I no longer have anything left to do. Like I don't know what else to do with it. Then I usually show it to someone else, or possibly multiple else's, to see if they have anything to add, and I'll edit then. And then eventually you just have to call it, like, this is done. I don't know. There's only so much you can do.
The follow-up question to that would be how much influence do those first readers and or your editor have? Has there ever been anyone who's like says, hey, what if you did this? And it's like, oh, the angels sing and the light shines out. You're like, that changes everything. I'm going to do this instead.
Yeah, that has happened to me quite a few times. Usually, if a piece of feedback is exceptionally upsetting, then I know that it is correct. Like, I believe it's correct, because I'm resisting, like, having to do that much work. I do love to revise, so that helps. But, like, I think the biggest example I can think of off the top of my head is that Carve the Mark used to be 100 pages longer in the beginning. I had an editor just be like, I think you can cut all of this. Like, you can condense all of it. And I was like, no, but I did it. So that was a big one. But yeah, frequently, like, someone says something and you say, ooh. But I think it was Neil Gaiman who said, like, the people point out a problem, they're usually right about the problem, but if they offer a solution, that's usually not right. Like, don't listen to people's solutions. And I've found that to be true. No offense to the people who have offered me solutions.
Okay, this question comes from a Northwestern student in the audience tonight. What's something you learned in college that helps you in your career currently?
Oh my God. I learned a lot in college. First of all, go Cats. Second of all, I mean, the biggest thing I learned in college is I did the creative writing program at Northwestern, where it's just a group of 15 people, and you do workshop. So you submit your story in advance on your assigned day, everybody reads it, and then you sit there, and the rule is you stay quiet while everyone critiques it. And you're not allowed to explain yourself, because in the real world, when people are reading your book, you don't get to explain it to them as they're reading it. And so you have to just receive their critique in silence. And I found that to be really helpful later, especially on the internet. Like, if you go yelling at everybody who says something wrong or dumb or bad about your book, then, I mean, first of all, you'll be very obnoxious. And second of all, like, you have to let that stuff go. But also, I found it helpful just in receiving criticism to learn how to receive it, accept that it hurts initially, and then take whatever is good from it. So as far as I'm concerned, like, in writing, you get to take everything good from the world and leave everything bad. Like, everything that you can learn, take it. It's all yours. So I think this is kind of where that philosophy crystallized for me. I didn't try not to get defensive, and I think that has served me well in growing as a writer, and as a person. And so that was like the main thing I learned. But I learned a lot in that program. So
Are there still writers today that you work with on that level of, like, almost workshopping something where they give you that kind of feedback, or you give them that kind of feedback?
yeah, so I, for whatever reason, fell in with like a group of writers when I first started, and they all ended up writing contemporary YA. And it's so great, but also, like, it's hard to, it doesn't translate. Like, the problems that you have are not always the same. So they can help to a certain degree, but maybe not as much as I always need, with like world building stuff. So yes, they will like help me a lot with character and with voice and stuff like that. But sometimes, like, you need somebody to go in there and just like poke apart all of your world building, which is partly why I started to work with John Joseph Adams, who's the editor of Chosen Ones and Poster Girl, because he's like a sci-fi titan, like an anthology god in the sci-fi space, and he's read so much. He was so good at that stuff. And so working with him was really helpful. So an editor can actually, yes, surprisingly, yes, be helpful. But other writers, yeah, it just depends on what kind of writer they are. But I do have some critique partners for sure.
That makes me want to circle back to one of my own questions, which was about working on an anthology, because you worked with Mr. Adams, it was?
Yeah.
On this anthology.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from people just how much an incredible amount of work that is. Was that like a...
Well, this is a different one.
Right. I mean, for any of those best of anthologies, or...
Yes, yeah, the best of ones are a little different because it's so for some anthologies you work with the writer in editing the story. That's not what I did. So I had to, for this anthology, read 80 short stories, 40, I think it was 80, yeah, 40 sci-fi and 40 fantasy. You read them without the author or writer name on them, so it's kind of like judge blind insofar as that's possible. And then I had to select the 10 best fantasy and the 10 best sci-fi. And that was a lot of reading. It was so interesting. I really think short stories is where, like, if you like sci-fi and fantasy, like, you should read short stories, because it's really where people get to play, and the form is so good for genre fiction, and genre fiction is so good for the form. Like, it's just a field of, like, crazy ideas that people, want to explore, but they don't maybe have the gas to do it for an entire novel. Like, it's maybe not built for that. like Ted Chiang is the best example of this that I've read recently, and Ken Liu. But anyway, so it was really fun to read all those stories. Sometimes you knew, like, you know, in the first like few paragraphs, you're like, okay, this is fun, but it's not like as good as these other ones I just read. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, most of them I had to read all the way to the end to know that, which, I don't know, they're great. They're really good stories.
Were there some hard choices where it was really heartbreaking to do something else?
Yes, so then, as it turns out, when you unblind the stories, you'll end up selecting multiples by the same people. And you can have duplicates. I have duplicates of one author, Johanka Delgado is her name. She's so talented. But I also had multiple Ken Liu stories because apparently I just really like him. And so then I had to, you know, like find, and I didn't know that, but there were plenty to choose from. You know, it wasn't like it was hard. But yeah, so there was some rearranging. Some were lost that I really still really love, but yeah.
We're going to a completely different tangent here, thanks to Runa. We've already talked about some of Runa's questions, like we've answered hers previously. But what are some favorite Chicago area restaurants?
Oh, man. Well, what's open now, guys? I don't know. There's a new one called Pompette in, where's that, Nelson?
Bucktown.
I'm sorry, I just put you on the spot. In Bucktown, right next to Le Bouchon, which is also very good. What else do I like? Oh, is it? Oh, what? You're laughing at me. Obelisk? That's good. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay. Is it with an X or isk?
Obelix.
Obelix. That one's good. Yeah. Cellar Door. Always good. Those are some faves. Oh, in Andersonville, you know, Lost Larson. Have you been there? Pastries.
Yes, Lost Larson. Except you can't just decide on a whim to go to Lost Larson because there's always a line. You either have to order ahead, or which is the best idea, or
Yeah.
otherwise you're lost. It's a long line out in the cold.
They have a good cardamom bun. They've got good bread.
They're really good friends. Back to writing. Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
What a question. I did not articulate that to myself at any point until college. But if you write, then you are a writer. So you don't have to achieve anything to be a writer. That's just, you know, if that's how you're spending your time, then that's what you are. So I guess I started writing every day when I was 11 because I had a big imagination as a kid, but then at a certain point, you can't wander into the woods talking to yourself because your neighbors get worried. So you have to do something else. So I started writing instead, and then honestly, it was such an escape for me, and it was a way of coping with stress and my undiagnosed anxiety disorder as a child. And so I never thought of it as something that I needed to do for a job until high school, and then you have to kind of think about what you want to study. So I started thinking about it then. And then in college, that's when I started to take it seriously. It's okay, I should try and finish a book. I should try to get published. This is what I want to do. So, I don't know. It can just be for you. If you like it. That's what I like about fan fiction. It's people just out there writing for fun. Wow, what a concept. So, anyway, that's just a shout out to, I never wrote any fan fiction, but I like to play in my own sandbox with my own shovels. Anyway, yep.
So some of what you've been talking about is we have been giving advice to people who want to write. There's people in this room who want to write or do write, right? So
Who likes to write? Donation. Yay.
Can you think of one or more pieces of advice you've received, either from classes or from other writers, that was some of the best advice for approaching writing?
Yeah, one super practical thing, I couldn't figure out how to end a short story, and my professor told me, well, everything that you need for the ending is in the beginning. So the idea is don't introduce anything at the last hour that will become necessary. Whatever thematically or practically you've set up at the start should come back in the end. So that was just great. I mean, I think about it all the time. She also had a good backpack metaphor This is Shauna Seeley. If you're at Northwestern, you can take a class with her. She's great. I think she's still there, but yeah. She had a good backpack metaphor, which is like only pack what you need to get to the top of the mountain, which is like anything extraneous in your story should go. So you only know that after you've written a rough draft. Trying to think of other good advice. My advice is to take all the advice and see if it works. And if none of it does, that's fine. But I always am trying new stuff. Like some people really swear by particular like ways of outlining or ways of developing character, and I'll give them a try. Like sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they work for one book and not the other. Like it's okay. I'm an advocate for like doing what you need to get to the end. So it doesn't matter what that is. Don't be so attached to process that you can't just like let go of process.
Well, I think one thing that I see different, you started very young in college. So many college students want to write, myself included when I was in college. So many college students never finish that book they started, myself included. So.
Yeah, they need to cultivate their desperation. That's what you need.
I have a whole, Serena, you have some great questions, but a couple of them are spoilers for books, even if they're books that have been published and have been out in the world. So we're going to, don't be offended that we're avoiding those questions.
I think you do that.
Yeah. but we can't, you understand, we can't give a spoiler to people who might not have read the book yet. Okay. But I can ask this from Serena.
Someday the statute of limitations will be over.
Right. So one of Serena's questions is, what inspired the Divergent series? What was the genesis of that?
Well, if you've been to any of my events before, you've probably heard this story already. Sorry for repeating it, but when I was in college, I was in a psychology course, and I was learning about exposure therapy, which is a method of treating anxiety and phobias, where you get exposed in a safe, controlled environment and at manageable levels to whatever stimulus provokes your anxiety or fear, regularly. And you do this over and over again because your brain desensitizes to those things if you experience them over and over again. And it kind of like builds over time. I just thought this was really interesting. Like, first of all, I've done this for anxiety and it was really helpful. But that was after I wrote Divergent. But I think I was fascinated by it because I probably knew I needed it, and also because it's torture, basically. Like, it's terrible. It doesn't feel good, guys. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. It helped me a lot, so it was totally worth it, but it was like rough getting there. And I just think it's interesting that our brains respond that way to, like, that's how you overcome fear, just repetition. That's crazy. So I think I just was interested in using that in like a kind of sci-fi way, as I do, and trying to think about technology that would facilitate that, kind of making people almost like, not superhuman, but just like, I don't know, like forming a whole, you could see how it would inspire a kind of like cult-like following, that kind of experience, because it seems very profound. And that's kind of where the Dauntless came from, and then Divergent came from there. Also, they do use VR for this now, which is pretty cool.
If you're scared of heights, then they give you something where you're...
Yeah, they use it especially for soldiers with, well, okay. I'll just have to drink this. They use it for soldiers with PTSD because it helps to, they can kind of gradually add in elements of like whatever the PTSD response is coming from in like a kind of safe way. Cool.
So you briefly referenced your novella. Can you give us a little, just among us here, sneak peek at what, because that's coming out, well, it's soon enough that booksellers have advanced reading copies in their hands.
Oh, do they? Oh boy.
If you ever want to get into bookselling, that's a huge plus. You get to read things 6 months before everyone else does.
I know, but then your recommendations are on like a
I
6
know.
months.
Yeah, that's the downside.
Yeah.
You can say, this is a great book that you can read when it comes out in 6
Yeah,
months.
you'll forget about it by then, but you'll,
No.
yeah. But yeah, my novella. Okay, so if you're wondering what a novella is, it's just a short novel. So yes, it's pretty short, but hopefully it packs a lot of stuff into that space. But it's a sci-fi retelling of Antigone. And if it's been a while since you've read Antigone, or you didn't read it in school, I will tell you what it's about, which is the original play. Antigone was written in 441 BC by Sophocles. And it's about two brothers find themselves on opposite sides of a civil war. They die by each other's hand, and then the king, Creon, decrees that the one on the wrong side of the Civil War cannot be buried with like their usual funeral rites, which at that time was like the harshest possible punishment, because it means like your journey to the afterlife is like thwarted by whatever. I don't know how to put it, but anyway, but the sister of that fallen brother, Antigone, steals away in the dead of night to bury him anyway, and she's caught. And then she has like this beautiful protracted argument with Creon about the morality of his decree, and he sentences her to death. It's a Greek tragedy, so you know how it ends. I feel like it's not a spoiler to say this. But my version of it takes place in a post-apocalyptic city where they're like the last civilization left, and because of the toxic environment, they've started to engage in gene editing for every child. But Antigone and her siblings are not edited, and this gives them like a particularly odd status, in like a low status, but also they're like nobility, so it's kind of both at once, which is true of the original play also. Anyway, so they're unedited. There's a lot of other things in the society that are going on, like because of the dwindling population, reproduction is mandated for those who are capable of reproducing, and Antigone feels a lot of tension about all of these things, and ultimately uses the sacrifice of her body, like knowing what will happen to her if she tries to give her brother these like the equivalent of funeral rites. She uses this sacrifice to spark a revolution. So that's arch-conspirator.
So we have that to look forward to.
February.
February 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So can I geek out just 1 quick minute, and because I'd read that part of your inspiration for that was reading the works of Anne Carson.
Oh no, I read the works of Anne Carson because I had the idea.
Oh,
Not
okay.
all the works of Anne Carson.
So she
but,
didn't spark it, but you were like, oh.
But Antigone by Anne Carson is like one of the best translations. Is it a translation or a retelling? Like it's kind of.
With Anne Carson, you never really know.
But it's so good, and it's so quick. I mean, it's such a quick read. Anyway.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Anne Carson.
She's great.
I think we've covered your questions, but we are going to give you a chance to come up and meet for.
Okay, so it's obviously the next day, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the event yesterday and, of course, show my books that I got signed. And by no means am I bragging about the books I got signed. I'm just fangirling right now, and I know other people fangirl when they get books in general, or like let alone signed books. And I just wanted to share because I know other people like that too. But anyways, so I had so much fun at this book signing talk event, and this is the second book signing and talk I've been to. But Veronica Roth, she's so nice. She's so like down to earth. She's so calm. She's so like just chill. And she was on time coming out, like right on the dot, because also I feel like everybody was on time that bought tickets beforehand. And one thing I do want to point out is that because in my first book event, I didn't know that you had to purchase a book, and that's your ticket to get into the book signing event. So if you don't buy the book, if you plan on going to a book signing / talk event, unless you want like 2 copies, don't buy the book beforehand. But I bought the book, so that was my ticket in, but I also had a +1, so I brought my sister as she was my +1. I don't know if that's for every stop on Veronica Roth's book tour journey, if that's the same thing for each one. But there's 2 options. Buy a book and it admits to, or buy a book and you're just admitted. That being said, I brought my sister and my best friend along. But my best friend, she's the one that went with me to the first book event I've been to. And she also said that she liked Veronica Roth's book signing and talk event more than the first one. This was more of like a quaint, intimate setting. It's a small independent bookstore, which I freaking love the bookstore. It's so cute and they have a lot of stuff there. I've also never been to this bookstore, but it's called The Book Stall. But right as we went in, You say your name, you get your book, and they escort you to the area that the book signing and talk is being held at. And there's like a couple rows, and then like there's like rows, and then like a row next for everyone. And it was like an hour away from me, so I had to go to the bathroom. And when I got there, my sister and my friend and me all had to go to the bathroom because it's an hour drive. And we went in the back room because something, I don't know, their bathroom wasn't working, so they had to use like a different bathroom. I don't know what it was, but there's the bathroom in the back, and then like in this little cubby area that you walk by and turn the corner, Veronica Roth is sitting right there, like waiting for her time to go on. And she is just so chill. Like, normally people are like, don't look at me, don't see me, I'm not here. But like, if I was actually coming back and walking back to my chair, I'm like, I made like glance, I'm like, but she was just like, hey. I don't know, she just wasn't what I was expecting. And people say don't meet your heroes, or don't meet like your favorite singer, actor, author, don't meet them because you like hype them up in your head and you'll be greatly disappointed. I hyped her up in my head to where like I thought she was just gonna be like this like well-known author and have like an air about her. Like I was thinking of someone totally different. Like, you know, seeing her picture is one thing, but like actually like being around in the same environment, let alone talking to her, I was just very amazed with my first impression because she's not what I thought she was gonna be, and it makes me like her even more. But the one thing I did want to say is that the thing that Veronica Roth posted on her Instagram, that she's having like a bookstagram person, I think, basically asking the questions to her. But for this one, there wasn't, and I think it was just like an employee of the bookstall, which is fine. He was kind of like very quiet too, but I do want to say that the other two ladies, that the one that was checking us in, and I think there's just like another one there that worked there for the event. I don't know if they worked for the event or they actually work at the bookstore, but those two ladies, they were so nice. They were so like warmth, and like they talked to you and like talk about their kids and their family and their life, and like, I don't know, it was a very intimate gathering of like 20 people, I think. I don't know, quaint, small, but in a good way. Compared to my first book event I went to, it was in this like small auditorium, but there's a lot of people. I'm not trying to drag Christine at all. I'm just saying. That's the only thing I have to compare to. But also, I really liked how Veronica talked about her mental health, because I'm going through mental health struggles right now, as I have made clear on my channel. And I did not know this about Veronica Roth, that she struggles and was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. She said she did like an article about weaning off her anxiety meds during the pandemic, and I'm like, I need to read that. But she was laughing about like how I was on it and then I wasn't on it, but then I'm back on my anxiety meds, and there's no problem with that. It doesn't mean that you failed if you're back on your medication. If it helps you, it helps you. It's fine. I really liked how she was so open about talking about her mental health and medications. It just made me realize how much I've built things up in my head, and I'm not the only one struggling with these things. Like, I know people struggle with it, but like, unless they come out and say it, I feel like I'm the only person, you know? So I really liked how she talked about that, because I was like taken aback by that, and it made me think more, like, not highly, but like, she's awesome. Also, I wanted to say the first two clips of Veronica walking out, and I think just her sitting down talking, no shade to my sister, but my sister was recording that because I gave her my phone to record on because she had a better view, and she's like, I'm not recording the whole thing, and I'm like, fine. So I took it, and I was trying to be like incognito as possible. I'm like, I don't want to draw attention to myself, but I want to get the whole clip. If I bump and weave, or like it's not steady, it's either me trying to get a better angle because the lady in front of me, she had great hair, but it was getting him out of the shot. Or I was getting like a little nervous and anxious, but wanting to still get the shot. And the picture up of Veronica Roth and her picture, or in her book cover, That's when I put my phone down because my arm did start to get tired. And plus I was probably really anxious. A mix of the both, I would say. But also I didn't realize. Her husband was sitting next to me. Yeah, and he's probably just looking at me like, oh my god. I wanted to die. No, I'm kidding. I tried to play cool, just focusing ahead and on what I needed to get. But also, I wanted to record it, but because of my anxiety, I probably wouldn't have like recorded it. It would probably just be like a voice recording. But I did ask Veronica a question, but I gave this one lady my phone so she can take pictures that I'll probably insert somewhere on here when she was signing my book. Veronica was signing my books. But I asked Veronica a question, like, which book was the hardest to write? And she's like, oh, dang. From what I can remember, because I was so frazzled that I was standing next to her and she was signing my books, that I think this was shit. And I asked my sister, like, did she say this? And my sister's like, yeah. And my best friend, she's like, yeah, she said this. So like, at least, okay, 2 people corroborating my story. I think I'm good. But she said that she felt so stressed while writing this book, so I guess this is the most difficult book to write for her. But the Divergent series, that was the most fun she had with the series, and Carve the Mark, it was fun. But this was her most stressful time because she was writing this 2 years ago, so that was like at the peak of the pandemic and of her, I think, going off her meds, but now she's back on her meds. So I can understand that. But anyways, I will show you the books that I got signed and I got personalized. My Divergent series, I believe these are all first editions. Yeah, first edition. Okay. So this one is Jessie Be Brave by Veronica Roth. I like her signature for some reason. It's so simple, but also like the way her I don't know. I just like it. What does it say? Be strong. Be minded. With a smiley face. So that's my Divergent series. And then, funny story about Carve the Mark. I have not read this book yet, but when getting my books together, like the day before the event, I'm like, I think I have another book by her, but I think I unhauled it and it's in a box for like donations or for little free libraries. Like, let me go look for it. So like I went into the box and I picked it up. I'm like, let me read the synopsis again. I'm like, oh shoot, well dang, I want to read it. Good thing I did not get rid of it. But I immediately put it in my bag and she got signed. She did little stars. I love it. And this is like a duology, and I wish I got this sequel to this that she could have signed last night. Yeah, well, hopefully when she comes around next for her other book, for her next book tour. But the star of the show, Poster Girl by Veronica Roth. I'm not gonna explain the synopsis of it because she already explained the synopsis of it when she first came out. But I'll put like a timestamp if you want to go back to hear like her talking about what this book's about. I'll put it somewhere on the screen, the timestamp for that. But I was not expecting this book to be so small. Like, I'm fine with it. I just wasn't expecting that because of the Divergent series and how big they are. But with epilogue, it's 269 pages. I love this page in the book. It has like the books that she's written in the series, and like then it says happy reading Jessie with like the iris. I just really like her signature. But when we were picking up the books at the front and checking in at the event, there's a piece of paper that you could take too it's a playlist you can listen to while reading the book. And I feel like a lot of authors have been doing this a lot lately, so I thought that was pretty neat. Veronica has another new book, but it's coming out February 21st, 2023, and it is called Arch-Conspirators. If y'all can see that. It's a novella. It's a reimagined retelling about a Greek tragedy. I wonder if she's gonna do a book tour for that one. But yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you guys liked it. I had so much fun recording this. Kind of stressed me out and getting me anxious, but I still had fun recording this, and obviously going to the event was so much fun. Like this video if you want more videos like this. But yeah, so like and subscribe if you want more videos by me, and I'll see you guys later. Bye guys.